So let us see here. What is she at?
Just like, for elective, she said she'll try to have a user requirement as an elective. So then like next semester, I won't really have as many classes.
Okay. Interesting though.
She's trying to do that. And so she had set me up for social welfare. And she was gonna have me do something else, but the classes were.
They're all booked.
Yeah, and then like they didn't line up for my schedule because I had chosen another class for that time.
Okay. Yeah. So you have taken 15 hours this semester? Mm-hmm. As long as you do 15 or 16 every semester, you graduate with 121. And then if you make sure to do, did you save a copy of this check sheet? Oh no. That's how much stuff we have to work on and get our mind like focused every time we do it. It's crazy. So that's 1100. That's actually your syllabus. But this is your check sheet. And now like, you'll put your grade in. I'll zoom in. Then you register. What's that? Yeah. So if you're able to write into it, say you're taking this right now, you have 3 credit hours, you write fall of 21, and you write your grades an A or a B or a C.
Oh.
And that way you know when you took it, what your grade was, and then you use this for graduation. So if you have this perfect, you give this to your advisor when you're like a junior or a senior, and then you say, all right, here, I've taken all of these, and then the registrar signs off on it, and then you graduate. 3.5 years later, you graduate. So yeah, make sure to like keep a copy of this. Every time you get a grade, type it in and save it. Put like your name and your degree. And just take these classes, you know. It's tempting to take other classes like yoga and basket weaving, but that won't help you graduate. So the key is just take these classes and you'll finish. Gosh, if you took 18 every semester, what is 121 divided by 18? Let's ask Siri. You could finish way early. All right, 121 divided by 18. Wow, you could finish in 6.7 semesters. That doesn't seem right. Well, yeah, that would be 3.5 years. So you would graduate December of your, and then if you took summer courses, you could graduate a year early, but that you have to pay extra for. This is like if you did 18 every semester. So, do you guys know when the last day to register is? Is it like Halloween?
Yeah, it's not.
It's coming up.
The 25th.
Oh, okay, right. Oh, yeah, the broken chair. There's always a broken chair somewhere. So, yeah. And here we are. Hello. How are you? We're dipping into social policy, and that's actually one of your all's classes. Next semester, you guys can take it next semester. If you're all social work majors. I always remember intro has different than social work majors, but so social policy is I used to be afraid of that word, but you actually like get a lot of your programs and money, and our social work jobs are funded by the social policy. So I'm sure you guys keep hearing all the stuff about politics. Like the past 2 years have been crazy with politics. Have you noticed that? The past 5 years, I've never heard more about, everybody hates this guy, everybody hates that guy. They all hate each other. And it doesn't seem like there's a right answer. So it's tricky, but ultimately, those are the dudes that like make our social policy, that fund our social work programs. So Obamacare was really big in 2011 because it put out a lot of Medicare and Medicaid funding that like pays for us to have jobs as social workers. Before then, there wasn't as much funding. So it's supposed to redress inequities in social institutions and provide assistance to persons in need. As a process, you hear about all these bills that are getting passed. This $3.5 trillion bill is the biggest one I've ever heard of. They want to pass $3.5 trillion to fund things, and they're going to fight it out for the next several months. Who knows if it'll get passed? But that's what they're working on now, and that's policy formation. They'll be like, well, these roads suck over here, so we need new blacktop, and they got potholes. We got to fix those, and they got addiction problems, so we need a program to help cure addictions. So give $500 million over there to, Central State. We're actually doing research on how healthcare is distributed throughout the system right now, and it's kind of inequitable. So that's some of the money even goes to research, so you can like find ways to better serve people. So don't be afraid of the word research. Is it hot or are you guys?
It's hot.
Can't do it. All right. So as a product, so the product is programs and services. You all have to remind me again what kind of social worker you want to be, because I always forget. What kind? School social worker, addiction social worker, hospice social worker. Okay. So that'll be one of the programs and services. Like monies come from the federal government to pay for you to work in that school a lot of times. Is there one you wanted to be, like school?
I've been thinking, and I really think I want to. At first, before I really took this class, I always wanted to be a school social worker. But now I kind of want to help the elderly.
Okay. So they would call that geriatric social work, I think. Yeah, geriatrics. Geriatrics is like hospice. I work with mostly old people. Like I sat with a dying person a week and a half ago. And you don't always have to sit with dying people. You could be like an advocate to get them food and their checks and their housing and money. We also have an agency called Council on Aging. So COA is the Council on Aging that helps people with like mobility, maybe getting them a wheelchair, maybe getting them, just basic needs.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your personal opinion. So you do this and you don't go as planned. Does it affect you? Will it make you want to go out your way and get it for them?
Sometimes. Like we had a policy.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, what were you going to ask?
Like you try to get them some food, and they like, no, they're denied food. Like they need food.
Right.
So would that cause you to go out your way?
Usually they give you the freedom to do that. Like I would take a lot of folks that I knew to St. Leo's Food Pantry because I knew the person there. I knew that they wouldn't turn them down. And I knew no matter what, they're going to give them an emergency food bag. Or I'd take them to the Free Store Food Bank. So in Cincinnati, they're pretty good about food. Our agency didn't want us to help them with bed bugs, but I would go ahead and help them because I knew how to kill bed bugs better than like most people with like chemicals. I would use this powder called diatomaceous earth. And when the bugs walk through the powder, it like cuts them open and they die and dry out and die from drying out. So I would do that, but they didn't want me to. So sometimes I would go about my own way. Now you don't want to tell your supervisor that because you can get in trouble. But that's where ethics come in. I thought that was the ethical thing to do. Like these people were suffering from bed bugs and I knew how to kill them. And it cost maybe $10. They probably didn't have it, but I had leftover powder. So I went into their house and we threw it. It looks like cover the whole area with powder and it kills the bed bugs. So that was another example. But usually I'll go to my social worker and you can advocate and they'll be open to like other suggestions. They'll be like, well, okay, sure. Why don't you go ahead and try?
Are you ever denied? Like, can you advocate what they deny you? Or if they deny me, I'm gonna be like, well, let me see what I can do myself.
It's possible. What's an example you could think of that would be like that?
Okay, so say you advocate in them for, let's say, a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
A wheelchair isn't as expensive, but it's enough money for someone who can't afford it, right?
It's expensive. Yeah, they're like $100-some at least.
Yeah, not as expensive.
Right.
So maybe it's expensive. But, so we deny them for having this wheelchair, but you seeing them, but they're not really seeing them. They hearing what you're telling them, but you're not seeing how he's struggling to get around and how he really needs it. So when they deny it, would you find a way to fund the wheelchair for him?
Yeah, sometimes you'll go to other agencies. Maybe you'll ask even churches that would donate it. Maybe so you go to every means possible, and usually they're okay with that. I feel like supervisors are usually on board with helping the people you're helping. But yeah, sometimes denials of money and funding happens, and you just have to keep on trying other sources of money, other sources of funding, other food pantries, other goods donations. So. And often this social work supervisor is good at finding those for you. So they're like, yeah, just go here. Hey, go over there. The most important is, you guys finishing, getting your license, taking your licensure exam. Hello. And going through that. And sometimes there are frustrations, and if you're annoyed with your supervisor, sometimes your supervisor has a supervisor and you can talk to them. It's not always recommended. Usually you find a way to work things out, so it's not terrible, like how do we get this done? And that's partly kind of what's going on with our funding. Like this legislation, a lot of it gets denied. Some people say that's too expensive a bill. $3.5 trillion will make inflation so bad that gas prices will go to $3.50 and $4.50 a gallon. So we don't want to do that. Let's find ways to, empower people to empower themselves. That's really what we want to do too. Like we don't always want to have handouts and funding from the government. We want to find a way to be like self-sustaining and maybe growing your own sources of funding. And so you guys probably already know this too. You learn this in government, but we have congressional, judiciary, and administrative. And so executive is the president, right? If you have like an executive order, that's the president signing off. Like he signed that recently that any business more than 100 people, you have to get vaccinated. Unless if you have a religious exemption or a medical exemption or a good cause exemption. Congress also then passes laws, and then our Supreme Court is the judicial. So I used to never pay attention to that, but the more I work in social work, the more I see that's where our money comes from, that's where our jobs come from, so it's good to pay attention to this stuff. So social workers a lot of times do what they call policy analysis, so you find out specifications, feasibility, merits. Those are all big words to say. You see if it works, see if it helps the people that you want to help, and how well does it help them. Then you'll have applications from formulation to implementation of policy, and then legislative analysis and lobbying. Actually, social workers have the largest lobbying group around. We lobby for different legislation, especially refugee resettlement. Lately, here's some of the social and political ideologies. There's a lot more than this, but this is all that you ever hear of. You hear we have liberals, you have conservatives, you have radicals, and then you have even social work and political ideologies. We tend to follow our code of ethics, the people that we want to serve, the people we want to help, how can we empower them? So with social work and social policy, there's practice that informs the policy, and then policy informs practice. I always hated when they said that in graduate schools. I'm like, what the hell does this mean? It was it's the reverse of the statement. Practice informs policy, and policy informs practice. What do you guys think that means? Because it's a bunch of big words.
If you're constantly doing something, that's going to be what you always do. That's what you're going to call your policy, because that's what you're used to doing. And policy informs practice. If this is the new policy that you set for yourself, you need to continue to practice so you don't forget it, make it you.
Mm-hmm. So you're right, and on a bigger level, like federal policies will come. Our social work practice will inform the policy. So if we are out there in the world seeing people suffering and they don't have housing, we want to push a policy that gives affordable housing to people. And then when you get that policy through, you try to make it in such a way that like there's housing for all. So our practice to get people housing would be the way that policy informs practice. So they kind of build off each other, kind of like what you said, but you're always working with getting the money where it's supposed to go. Because right now, if we had a bunch of money for, let's say, AIDS research, but the problem's coronavirus, that's great. You still need money for AIDS research, but we probably right now need more money for coronavirus research. So like that's kind of where they like shift the policies. Then there's also this last one says integration of policy and practice. So you have direct practice, which most of us will do. Like you'll go see clients, you might be in a private practice, you may help people at a food pantry, you might be in several fields. Then you also have agency and organizational policy. So whichever agency you work for, they're going to have their own policies. And you also have different fields of practice. So we mentioned geriatric social work, we mentioned homeless advocacy social work, we mentioned child and family social work. So if you go into graduate school, a lot of them have those specialty areas that you can get into. Hello, how are you? So any questions so far? Because I know this is a lot, and this was always weird to me to think like, all right, so the government pays for our social work jobs. In a way, they kind of do, believe it or not. A lot of grants that you'll write will be through the government, and they'll pay for your social work practice. You sometimes get private pay, but overall, we pass different bills that help these 4 areas. So the social service system, the social welfare system, societal contact. So again, seeing what the main issue at hand is. Right now, it does seem to be coronavirus. There is a new poll this morning. So somebody took the poll. You guys remember when they told us that COVID was over and we could like take off our masks in May? Was that May? Like the end of the school year last year? And like everything was good. All the businesses opened up. We had baseball and opening day and football. And then I don't know what happened. Maybe it was August, or like they said there was a new variant of it that's killing people. And so that's kind of the context we're working with right now. And I bring that up because somebody took a survey this summer and they asked like, how are people feeling? How are they economically? How are you emotionally? And how is your well-being? He took the survey in May or this summer to see how we're doing. It had been a year and a month and a half of lockdowns and like suffering. So he took the survey. What do you guys think he found this summer? It was on NPR this morning, so I'm just repeating what National Public Radio said. He surveyed people like, how do you feel? How is your economic well-being? How is your emotional well-being? The overall state of your family? What do you think the answer?
That a lot of people are struggling. They like, let's just get it back to normal because it's already hurting our kids.
Yeah, so he thought because it was the end of the pandemic, they'd all be like, dude, things are good. The government gave me a bunch of checks. We're having a party this summer and going wherever. And he found that a lot of people were still suffering. He found that like nobody really made it out of the economic mess of the past year and a half. During the survey, the Delta variant, whatever they call it, was ramping up and they were shutting things down and masks and all that were coming back. So what he thought he would find that everybody's happy and life is good and we're going to have another baby boom or whatever, it ain't happening. He's like, what I found was a lot of people were getting their last government unemployment check, that some of the money that was distributed people had used it all and they didn't know when the next money was coming. A lot of people had maxed out their credit cards. And so that was just this morning. I don't even know what to make of that research. It was some dude from Harvard, and you put out a survey to 3,000 people to see, how are y'all feeling? Like, how are you guys feeling with the pandemic? Like, are you done with it? Are you tired of it? You think it's...
Truth be told, I never was affected by it.
Mhm.
Like, thank God, but
Mhm.
our family, there's
Mhm.
and these masks.
That's true. Didn't they say we didn't have to wear these if we're vaccinated? Like, you don't have to wear a mask if you're vaccinated.
Yeah.
But then what happened?
You gotta wear.
Yeah, I know. It's-
I've gotten used to the pandemic.
Yeah,
Like, I've gotten used to wearing
yeah.
masks and following protocols and.
Right. It is weird too because there's research on both sides. One that says masks and vaccinations are the only thing that will help, and then another one saying that masks cause bacterial pneumonia and stuff like that. So it's like, I feel like that's what stresses me out more than anything, is the fact that you get information that says two different things from everybody in the media, and like nobody can get it straight. They all have something else to tell you. Like, if you don't get vaccinated, you're going to kill grandma, or if you don't wear a mask, or you're not.
And then I seen, I think it was on Instagram, this girl told how she got Pfizer, the COVID shot, and it like paralyzed her.
Exactly.
Like they do
Right.
different stuff to everybody, so I don't believe that it can,
I was at the school for 2 weeks, this past 2 weeks, because I got the vaccination shot and I got an infection in my arm.
Oh, you did? Oh, crap.
The stuff did the last Monday, so I was at school for 2 weeks.
So you do think it was from the vaccine?
Yeah, they gave me a doctor's note to say I gotta get vaccinated. And I only got the first shot.
Oh, so you're not going to get the second one. Okay. Well, you might be allergic. Yeah. So that's the scary thing, is we don't know the allergies in it. And it's like, is it fully FDA approved? I've heard Comirnaty is the only FDA approved shot. And apparently they don't give the Comirnaty shot in the United States of America.
That's why I don't blame people for not wanting to get their vaccine, because I understand both sides. Like, yeah, it's to prevent, getting yourself sick and other people sick. But then again, like what you were saying, you don't know type of allergic reaction when it comes to it. Because I also heard that the vaccine was giving women problems with birth.
Yeah.
Causing miscarriages and stuff.
I have definitely heard that. Now, the important thing is that we always vet our sources, but I've heard breastfeeding mothers have had babies get a blood clot. Vaccinated breastfeeding mothers. So it's really hard. There's another new one. I don't know if you guys have heard this. This is interesting, but this doesn't seem too much different from the vaccine. How do you spell vasectomy? Oh yeah, well they tell us. So there's a few. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. Pennsylvania representative proposes legislation to force men after 40 to have a vasectomy. Because they're saying, okay, he said in response to the Texas abortion ban. So it's like two extremes on the other side. And if that was the case, I had my first kid at 42 and my second one at 43. I want to have any kids. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm glad they didn't have this back then, as I'm excited I had. Last year I had a girl in June. This year I had a boy in May. So, but is interesting is it almost seems similar. They say our freedoms. You always hear stuff about what your protected rights are and your freedoms. But this is saying, yeah, all men will be forced to have a vasectomy within 6 weeks of having their third child or turning 40 under a new lawmaker's proposal for Pennsylvania. Representative Chris Rabb introduced the legislation, which also grants a $10,000 reward to private citizens who report violators of the law. Rabb created the legislation, so that means somebody's going to go in here and snip off my vas deferens, like whatever makes you make a kid. And it just, that seems like invasive a little bit. I don't know, because there are some people that wait till they're 40 to have kids. He said he was inspired. Obviously, you see my opinion in here, but it's like, what happened to some of the freedom things? So the bill drew criticism. I don't know if it'll make it through the Senate, but this is another example. And we're talking about social policy. Shoot, which one were we on? This one. So yeah, social policy, this is some of the stuff that you'll see. And that's kind of like, I guess knowing what the context is also important, because this is how, this explains that last one that you described too. So policy, practice informs policies. The client, the social worker, you work for an agency and organization. Your field of practice is mental health, income maintenance, housing, child welfare, corrections, or geriatrics. Then you have your social service delivery system, which is all fields of practice, public and private organizations, accrediting agencies. Then there's the social welfare institution, society, culture, and then global. So the world economy, human rights. And then whatever is going on in the world, that policy will inform practice. Like, how do we serve the people that we're serving? And you work that back in reverse. So like, how can we better serve those who are homeless, those who are suffering, those who need a wheelchair, those who need housing? Here's examples of the way policy influences practice. So for one, it determines interactions between the clients and the practitioners. You guys in 3 years would be the practitioners. So you graduate, you would take your licensure exam in like 3 years and 1 month and a half. You could take it your last semester at Central State. It also reflects the intent of the agency and then establishes service priorities. It also identifies target population groups. So for the past 15 years, we've had this opioid epidemic because we had a lot of heroin come through the system and a lot of pain pills made out of opium from Afghanistan. Like, since we had the war in Afghanistan, 98% of the heroin and opiates are grown in Afghanistan, somehow come back to the US. So that's helped inform our policy and our practice. We have a lot of rehab agencies. We have methadone and Suboxone clinics that help you get off of heroin and off of stuff like that. And that's your target population. And then here's the way, examples of ways policy influences practice. So it stipulates funding parameters. I think Ohio got $400 million for opiates and Kentucky got $500 million for opiates, and that pays the social workers. It also specifies jurisdictional boundaries and then directs the practice activities. So if there's too many drug rehabs in one area, that's maybe when they'll like stop adding new ones, because at one point there's too many and there's just not a need. Maybe everybody got sober and you don't need drug and alcohol rehabs anymore. You need to turn those buildings into housing or homeless shelters because there's more homeless people from the pandemic because they lost their job. Then there would be street level services. So this is this dude, his name is Lipsky, published on street level bureaucracies. So that's the governmental service sector. And again, that could be like at Lighthouse, we did go and visit under the bridges of Cincinnati and find the homeless populations and like help get them food if they wanted, offer them to come into the homeless shelter if they wanted, but they certainly could stay living under the bridge if they'd like. And then street level bureaucrats, that's where you allocate welfare and protect public safety. They're subject to bureaucratic constraints. Like, we pushed a law in Cincinnati that forbid tent cities, so in the city limits. And I don't know how I feel about that, because if somebody's homeless and chooses to be homeless, they should be able to stay wherever they want. But at the same time, like, if you have tents all over your city in the business sector, it doesn't look good for business. Like, nobody wants to go to those business when there's like aggressive panhandlers coming at them and asking for money and spitting on them if they don't give them money. So there's like a double-edged sword there. It's like, which way do you go? All right, build another homeless shelter and tell them if they want to live in a tent, they got to go like maybe a mile that way because there's plenty of land. So it gets tricky. You'll have street level clients. So they're labeling and social construction of clients. And that's something that we'll get, like we label folks by our DSM diagnosis. So we'll label alcoholism, we label anxiety, we label depression. And that's fine as it helps us find the cure and how to serve that person better. So you guys have already gone through most of this. This is our history of public welfare. So you had the progressive era in the 1910s and 1920s. Actually, it's interesting because this is when they printed all the money, or they had like, you guys ever remember hearing about the Roaring 20s anywhere before? Mm-hmm. So like the flappers and everybody was partying and life was good. And then at the end of the 1920s, they made alcohol. And coincidentally, we went into the Great Depression. So in all of the 1930s, have you guys seen what it looked like during the 1930s?
The Great Depression stuff?
Yeah.
I seen the picture.
Yeah. Which is interesting because we're not far from that right now, but there's not pictures of it because back then you had to give people money in like coins and silver and gold to buy their food. Now we can send money electronically through bank account, and you can go to the store and buy food, and you can't tell who's on food stamps or welfare and who's not. So that's the difference, but I don't think we're too far from that Great Depression. I want to show you guys some images. I know you've already seen them, but there's some that were kind of nuts. And we tried to start fixing that. Does anybody know what got us out of the Great Depression by chance? World War II, yep. It was like 1941. We started making bombs and tanks, and like those were all the jobs, which is messed up. But luckily back then, the war was against a dude named Hitler who was trying to bring like communism all over the world. So it seemed more justified back then. Nowadays, we have these endless wars that seem to go like on and on and on. Like, how long were we in Afghanistan? I think it was, how long? 20 years. So yeah, and you would have seen back then, there's some of the use in a wheelchair sign legislation, but like some of the stuff that we had was pretty rough. And so work-wise, we may be back here. And this is how the president put us back to work. Solar panels may help us, like some of the green stuff.
Crash, which resulted in the complete meltdown of the American economy, which eventually spread worldwide, including Europe. As a result of the stock market crash, people lost their jobs. Unemployment was over 20%. In some areas of the country, we reached a total of 50%. There was great migrations from rural areas to urban areas. And you also had the Dust Bowl era, where a lot of the farmers who lost their farms,
those cars are weird looking,
moved to the California area to find work. So there was a that promised a new deal for the American people, about government programs to put men and women back to work, to help all parts of society, including the businessman and the farmer. He also helped put the banking system back on track, as well as the regulated stock market, to make it run more smoothly. And one of the New Deal programs was the Civilian Conservation Act, or CORE. And this was a program for young men. It was sort of a military-style arrangement. They stayed at camps, they had a mess hall, and these men would go out and work, usually in conservation work, buildings.
So we have something right now called the Green New Deal. So they're kind of doing this with solar panels and putting up the green. Have you seen the electric cars and the green cars? That's what they think might get us out of this little funk that we're in right now. So those are some of the images from the Great Depression, and then some of the state parks that they put up during that time. So there's quite a few. After that, then we had the 60s with the civil rights movement, new federalism in the 70s. Welfare reform was with President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. So some of those rules, they made you work in order to receive welfare or be actively seeking a job. And then with Obama, we had healthcare reform in the 2000s. So here's kind of a list of like a lot of the things that were passed that put things back on track. So in the 20s and 30s, they had FEMA was in 33. So the Federal Emergency Relief Act. The Social Security Act was in 41. The Civil Rights Act, 1960, was in 64. Then also Social Security, and then with the 80s, we had Family Support Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, which some of you, like if you get extra time on your tests, that what we have today. Even like the wheelchair ramps and like handicap access to all the buildings, that's under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then the big one for social workers is that 2010 Healthcare and Education Reconciliation Act. And that was Obamacare. So those are some of the acts that we had passed. Here's old age survivors of disability, temporary assistance for the needy, and then supplemental security income. Some of your either parents or grandparents could get some of those. And then Medicare and Medicaid, which was expanded in 2010. And then social service block grants. So those are some of the modern era and like some programs that have helped us get through these. So that is all I have for today, believe it or not. I know we're crushing through it fast and getting out early. Do you guys have any questions? Because it seems really humid in here. Am I making that up, or is it like hot and humid? Okay. I'm just checking. I don't know if it's just me. Maybe I got COVID or something, but it just feels hot. Any questions? Any questions about your assignment? Did any of you guys, so if you sign up for presenting your next assignment, whoever wants to go first, just tell me and come up and we'll plug you in and let you present on your observation right in the middle of class. So anytime you want to present it.
So for our presentation, do we have to use like a specific presentation, if you get what I mean?
Like a PowerPoint presentation,
Yeah.
one in it, show it up on the screen, and then even what you're trying to say.
Yeah, because I was going to use Keynote.
That's fine. Is it like the same as PowerPoint?
Yeah.
That's totally know how to load it on here, but you might know how. And
Yeah, I just because like I'm used to using Keynote throughout high school.
okay.
I was using Apple products.
Oh, are you able to use it on a Dell?
Maybe, I really don't know.
Or if you have a Mac, we could bring it up here. Like if you know how to do that stuff.
Like,
So,
I
yeah.
use PowerPoint, but I like using Keynote because I'm more used to it.
That's fine. If you think you're able to get it up here to present to people,
All right.
that would be good. And the key is just you guys learn how to present, because as social workers, you'll have to present your ideas. To get money and funding, sometimes you have to present ideas. And like to talk to your supervisor or do trainings, just learn how to get up and talk to people, essentially. So that's kind of what it's about. And the diversity experience, knowing that like we'll serve every kind of client that is around. I guess I should stop this. Anybody else need the sign-in sheet?